Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. We're waiting for two more participants, pero si ocupan interpretación al español, pueden pasar aquí con Judith, por favor. Ella tiene audífonos para cualquier persona que necesite interpretación al español. We will be starting in just a couple minutes. Good evening, everybody. We're going to start in about 1 minute. If anybody would like to grab some food, there's food available. And si alguien ocupa traducción al español, la interpretación al español, la intérprete está aquí, se llama Judy, y tiene los audífonos para la interpretación al español. Lilyana said you came all the way from the city, so yeah, not a good time of day to come from the city. So thank you for being here.
No problem. I'm thinking earlier, but we had so much work at the office.
Oh, in Elgin. Oh, okay. Oh, really? Okay, okay, all right, okay. Yeah, yeah. All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are finally going to get started. We had a few folks commuting from Chicago, so we appreciate their effort, and we're so happy to get started here. So once you get some food, go ahead and take a seat, and we will begin the program. All right, good evening. Welcome, everyone, to the first event for Latinx Heritage Month 2023 here at Elgin Community College. My name's Antonio Ramirez. I'm a professor of history and political science here at the college. I'm also the co-director of the new Center for Civic Engagement at ECC. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction to this program. It's called Human Rights in the Latinx Community and Beyond. I'm going to talk a little bit about human rights, and then we're going to hear from some of our really wonderful panelists that we're so privileged to have here today. So, of course, Latinx Heritage Month has its history, at least 50 years of history in the United States. And let me see if I can. Oh, let me grab my. Sorry about that. Oh, not sure what's going on here. All right. Well, we'll do without the PowerPoint for right now. Latinx History Month has at least 50 years of history in the United States. It started in 1968 under President Lyndon Johnson, who established Hispanic Heritage Week. And 20 years later, President Ronald Reagan established Hispanic Heritage Month. So we've been celebrating that month ever since the unlikely hero Ronald Reagan established this celebration. And I really want to recognize one particular Latina who has made a big impact on Hispanic heritage, Latinx heritage here at ECC, and that's Jane Barbosa. So Jane Barbosa was a longtime community activist and member of the ECC staff. She was the founder of OLAS, the Organization of Latin American Students. Here at the college, she founded our Latino Heritage Month kickoff breakfast. So we remember her today, and particularly as we're talking about human rights in the United States and in this region. So really, of course, an important milestone in the development of human rights came in 1948 with the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. It set the standard for human rights across the globe. But today, there's a lot of reasons to be concerned about the status of human rights and other rights around the world. And I really want to share today that I believe, as a historian and as a member of our global community, that we're really at an inflection point around human rights and our democracy, as several really unprecedented crises are colliding in our world. So UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres gave an address to the United Nations General Assembly this month. And here's what he said in part. He said, quote, "Our world is becoming unhinged. Geopolitical tensions are rising. Global challenges are mounting. Democracy is under threat. Authoritarianism is on the march, inequalities are growing, and hate speech is on the rise. We confront a host of existential threats, he said, from climate change to disruptive technologies, and we do so at a time of chaotic transition. And we seem incapable of coming together to respond. But he did believe that we have some tools and some path forward, even though that path forward is a bit blurry. He said that determination is going to be a big part of our path forward through these crises. Determination to end the scourge of war, determination to promote social progress and better lives for all people, and determination to reaffirm our faith in human rights. So what does he mean when he says human rights? I want to just take a moment to explain that concept. Human rights are universal at their core. All living humans have human rights. Someone doesn't have to be a particular kind of person or a member of some specific nation or religion to have human rights. People have human rights regardless of whether those rights are found in the practices, morality, or law of their country and culture. Human rights are deeper than laws and rules. Many people believe that we are born with human rights, that human rights are innate or inherent in human beings. And some argue that those rights are God-given. Our own Declaration of Independence claims that people are, quote, endowed by their creator with natural rights like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But in some ways, human rights are even deeper than religious belief because they're universal despite religious belief. In fact, in Thomas Jefferson's first draft of the Declaration of Independence, he did not use the word endowed by their creator. He used the word, quote, equal creation, right? So even the original drafter of the Declaration of Independence signaled at rights that in some ways even precede religious belief. When human rights theorists toss and turn about what is the nature of human rights, they often come to similar conclusions that human rights are about autonomy, agency, or personhood. And these are some of the most fundamental rights that we have. One prominent theorist says that human rights' most important job is to protect our pursuit of a worthwhile life, having agency and personhood and the ability to pursue a worthwhile life. So some of the questions I want us to consider as we're starting this discussion today are, does everyone in our community have equal access to the pursuit of a worthwhile life, to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? More specifically, when we look at the title of this event, do Latinx members of our community have equal access to those human rights? Now, that's something, that I want to encourage you to think about as you listen to our esteemed guest today. But I think I want to volunteer that in nearly all cases in our community, the answer to those questions is no. And you don't have to take my word for it. The Latino Policy Forum and the UIC Great Cities Institute published a report just last month that they launched here at ECC called Latinos in the Suburbs. That report did find that Latinx people may have made some progress in all of these areas that relate to human rights, income, education, healthcare, housing, but in nearly every single economic indicator, every single one, Latino and Latina people in our community lagged behind whites and other non-white, non-Latino groups in our region. One of the starkest reminders of this is some of the empirical data that, that the Latino Policy Forum did in this report, and you can see it on the chart right here. Thank you so much, Gea. This chart shows some empirical data on the per capita income for non-Latino residents in the blue bars and per capita income for Latino and Latina residents in the dark purple bars. And in every single collar county of Chicago, where the majority of Latinos live, the income, per capita income for the average Latinx person was half that of white residents. In Kane, it was less than half, right? So the problem here is real. And the question for the panelists today is, what can we do about this persistent inequality? What can we do about these things? And we're so happy to welcome these 5 distinguished panelists today to share some of the work that they're doing and the avenues that they're creating to address some of these problems in our communities. We hope you're going to learn a little bit about what human rights are and how you can help defend them today. We'll hope you'll get some tools today to help create a brighter future for all of us. So I'm going to be brief in my introductions of the panelists, but I'll introduce each of them and then we'll hear from the panelists. Each is going to have about 10 to 15 minutes to share their work. So furthest on the left here is Stephen Monroy. Thank you for being here. He's the Director of Fair Housing at the Illinois Department of Human Rights. Next, Barbara Barreno-Paschall, Vice Chair of the Illinois Human Rights Commission. Next to her is Jose Frausto, the Executive Director of the Chicago Workers Collaborative. Lilyana Olayo, she is a parent peer trainer at the organization Community Organizing and Family Issues, known as COFI. And next to her is Talibah Moore, who is a community organizer with COFI. Let's give everyone a round of applause for being here. Thank you so much. And we are going to start our discussion with Mr. Monroy.
Right. Hello. Working fine? Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Professor, for having us today and for the lovely introduction. I'm going to pause just a moment. I brought a few slides here, but while we're bringing them on the screen, I just wanted to share, I'm an Elgin resident and a former student at ECC, so it's just incredible to be back here with everybody. I just really appreciate that introduction as well about framing about what we're talking about as the Latino community in the suburbs and really just what is happening now, every, in the present day. 1968 was such an important year because not only was that was the Latino Heritage Month and a lot of that started changing, but it was also the year that the Federal Fair Housing Act was passed. And now the Federal Fair Housing Act that most of you have probably heard about, or at least heard the phrase fair housing, it means that there has to be equal opportunity for people based upon specific classes. But what we don't talk about a lot and think about is how connected the Fair Housing Act and the struggle for fair housing is to the other civil rights laws that have been passed across the country and across time. So what we're looking at in terms of these rights we're talking about, it's not just in isolation. It's not just about housing. It's about employment. It's about voting rights. It's about education. So all of these different facets of civil rights are equally important. And what is our privilege at the Department of Human Rights and with my colleagues at the Human Rights Commission is that we play a role in a lot of those different areas. As was mentioned, I'm currently the director of the fair housing at the Illinois Department of Human Rights. So in that role, I oversee fair housing investigations. And housing is just such an incredibly important part of a person's life. Although employment is also equally important, as is voting rights and employment. From all of those, people go to places and they do things and then they come home. And so home is the place that affects everybody's well-being. It is really the core of being able to succeed in society. Can we move on to the next slide, please? And then, but while we're showing here about what our department does, I also do want to flag that we use the words human rights and civil rights sometimes interchangeably. But as the professor wonderfully set up, human rights are something that people are born with that are intrinsic. Unfortunately, I think our department is a little bit misnamed because although we do enforce rights, they're a little bit narrower than human rights. They're civil rights. There are different protections that the government has set up. So incredibly important, but what we're talking about today is just one small facet of civil of the broader human rights struggle that we'll be focusing on, because that is the work of the department and of the state of Illinois. Our department does a few different things. We do protections in housing, which my team oversees. We protect things in employment, in public accommodations, meaning universities, movie theaters, restaurants, places where people can go and enjoy that are open to the public. And then we also protect in financial credit. So when someone goes to get a loan from a bank or some other financial institution, we protect those. And is the microphone okay here? Okay, perfect. So when we're talking about these civil rights that we're protecting with the Department of Human Rights, we're talking about two very important things. And it kind of leaves around a gap as well. So when we're talking about discrimination legally, we're talking about something that was done wrong, some kind of harm. Somebody was evicted, some people were not hired, or they were passed over promotions. These are what we call issues. There's something that negative that happened to affect a person, but it also has to be tied into a protected reason or a basis. This could be a person's sex, a race, national origin. And I'll go through the list of the things that we protect in Illinois in just a moment. But as you can see here, not everything that is wrong is protected under civil discrimination, because if it's not in one of those lists and one of these reasons, and then also if somebody was treated differently because of one of these different bases, but there was no illegal harm that happened there, it's not protected. And I say this to mean that our laws, the Department of Human Rights and the Illinois Human Rights Act that we enforce, although it might not protect someone, there's under these situations, there are so many other laws that could play. There could be landlord-tenant laws that the landlord didn't do what they were supposed to, or the employer that did something wrong as well. If somebody was not paid the minimum wage, that's unlawful, but that might not be discrimination. And so we see a lot of people that come to our department saying, oh, we would like you to help with this, and this is what happened with us. And we try to get to the right people, because government can oftentimes be a maze of getting people to the right and who handles it. So I share this to think about what this is in discrimination. It's not all there is about human rights, but these are the things that are covered under civil rights in Illinois. Next slide, please. Can we advance the next slide? Perfect. And so the commissioner is going to be talking a little bit about this as well, but something that is very essential to know about is, what are we protected about? What is these different protected bases or protected classes? And I like better the use of the words protected factors rather than protected classes. Because when we think protected classes, we say some people are protected, some people are not, but that's just not true. Everybody has one of these characteristics, and everybody is protected, whether somebody is Indian or white or Black or gay or Muslim. We all have different characteristics that make us who we are. And in some way or another, they are all protected. That means that any one of us could face discrimination. Any one of us could discriminate intentionally or not. And so these laws set the ground rules and the basis for what these legal protections are. Going through just a few of them, if we could advance to the previous slide, please, or just go back a little bit. Thank you so much. The classic ones that we think about are race, color, ancestry, ethnicity, national origin. So these are all different facets of the same thing. Who is the person? How do they identify racially or in a group? Where did their ancestors come from? For me, my national origin might be a little complicated, because my parents came from Mexico and I consider myself Mexican, but I was born in the United States. So is my national origin the United States of America, or is it Mexico? It could be both. So these different classifications could get really complicated. And so when we're enforcing these laws, we look and we say, who is the person? How do they identify? And how are they protected under these laws as we apply them? Other important ones to think about are sex, sexual orientation, gender identity. All of these laws, all of these are protected to some extent federally, but in Illinois, we have even additional protections on top of that, as well as some things like familial status and housing, meaning that a person has children who live with them in the unit. The landlord should not be, questioning well, do you really need to have these children with you? Or I don't think this space is appropriate for you. That is really a decision for the family to make in most cases. And there are maybe some safety concerns or size concerns that fall into it. But for the most part, familial status is a very important protection. And then finally, on that previous slide, I want to share that if somebody complains about discrimination, and this goes for housing and employment in these other areas, if someone complains and they say I was mistreated, whether or not they filed an official complaint with a state agency or a lawsuit, they're protected from retaliation. So if somebody says, these are my rights and this is how it's not going well and someone's doing something inappropriately, they cannot be retaliated against or made afraid of complaining in the future. Next slide, please. And in Illinois, previous slide, thank you. And in Illinois, this is a list of additional protections that not all states and the federal government do not necessarily have. So we have specific things that were created. Specifically, I want to highlight some things like arrest record. Arrest record means that if a person has an arrest record, but they haven't been convicted, or if they have some arrest when they were a juvenile, or whether they were have an arrest that was sealed, that shouldn't be held against them. And so the landlord should be very careful to say that they're not going to say, we have this arrest that did not lead to a conviction and not rent to somebody, that would be unlawful. And because this is, a Latino event and want to make sure that these I really highlight these, those 17, 18, and 19 are incredibly important. And I've had the privilege to work on some of that legislation. So the immigration status, Illinois is soon to become only the third state in the country to protect immigration status by itself in housing. So for years, people have said if they were discriminated against because they were undocumented, because they were born in a different country, regardless of their status, we would have to look at is there discrimination based on their national origin, based on their race, or something like that. But we all know that it is possible for a landlord just to say, we don't like people that are coming from have a certain immigration status, or I'm going to ask for social security numbers and not take individual taxpayer identification numbers or ITINs. So these protections are now going to soon go into law in Illinois officially on January 1st. Same for work authorization. In Illinois is only one of two states, us and California, that protect work authorization. So if a DACA recipient has work permits, that means that a employer cannot say, I don't know if you're going to lose your DACA status in a couple months, so I'm not going to hire you. I'm not going to take the chance. Employers should only be able to look into say, does the person have work authorization at the time that they have it? And so that is a law that is currently in place in Illinois. So if you know DACA recipients, or if you yourself are one, please know your rights and bring charges to us at the department. And same with language. Language, we have a protection in employment that if somebody is told they can't speak Spanish and that or in different language, and they're not actually interacting with customers, there's no safety issues, that is unlawful. What people are communicating with, if it's not causing a disruption at work, that is protected. And then what is going into effect that we're currently just went into effect recently are source of income protections. So this means that if someone has a Section 8 voucher, if somebody receives veterans benefits or disability benefits, they are protected. And I just want to talk a little bit about our department, but can I do a quick time check and how much I want to make sure I don't go too far over.
Yeah, you have some more time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So now that I talked about all these protections in terms of our department, what can be done with them? For housing, and I can start here, housing probably have some of the best protections in Illinois and federally. So if somebody is discriminated against in housing, say somebody is turned away because of their race or their national origin, what can be done is the person can come to our department, the Illinois Department of Human Rights, and file a complaint saying that they've been treated this way. And the department will then launch an investigation and we'll see what the facts are. We'll find, who said what, and may issue a determination, finding or not substantial evidence saying that there's enough there to move on to the next level, which is the Human Rights Commission. which actually hears and decides, did this happen? So our department at the Illinois Department of Human Rights, we act as the gatekeepers to the Illinois Human Rights Commission and making sure that cases that are going there have some kind of merit there. The benefits to coming to the department are that we are completely free. If somebody doesn't have an attorney, is not sure if they were discriminated against, but they want to check, they can file their allegations and we investigate. In housing, people also have a right to go directly to court. So they can go and they can file a lawsuit, whether in state or federal court, depending upon what law that they're enforcing. And so if somebody has a really good case, perhaps an attorney would take it. So those are just two different options. And I mentioned those first because employment has a more strict process that then goes to the department or goes through federal agencies first. But for housing, people can go to court directly through there. Can we get the next slide, please? So when we're talking about in the department, we do all things charges of discrimination, which are just essentially cases that we then investigate. But I'm happy to take any questions about how the Human Rights Act works at the end of the presentations. But I do want to reiterate again, just because something is not discrimination does not mean that it wasn't wrong. So we encourage people, if they feel like they were violated their rights because of an employer, because of a public accommodation, or because of housing, to speak with us and file a charge of discrimination, but also talk to an attorney, talk to other people, see what your rights are, because there could be very complicated situations where there could be discrimination and there could be also other things happening too. And again, thank you so much for having us here.
Thank you, Mr. Monroy. I'll just mention very briefly that we will have time for questions at the end of the presentation. So if you have any additional questions for him, you can take the mic and ask some additional questions. So next we'll hear from Vice Chair Barreno-Paschall, who will talk to us a little bit about the Illinois Commission for Human Rights.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It's so great to see you here in the audience, and thank you to those who are watching on the live stream. I want to thank Professor Antonio Ramirez for inviting me and for organizing this fantastic event. I'm really excited that Director Monroy is here with me, as well as our other colleagues on the panel, and I hope you all learned something interesting tonight from our conversation. My name is Barbara Barreno-Paschall, and I'm Vice Chair and Commissioner of the State of Illinois Human Rights Commission. And as you've just heard, we're a sister agency to the Department of Human Rights, and I'll explain in just a moment how that works, because it might be a little confusing that there are so many government agencies and what do they all do. We were just talking about this before the panel began and how it can be confusing, and hopefully I can help clarify some of that when it pertains to discrimination. I'm going to have a few slides here that I'll be going through. And of course, at the end, if we have a few minutes, if any of you have questions, don't hesitate to ask me. I also brought some brochures today, and if you would like to take some with you and to the places you work or your community, please do. And we have them in Spanish as well as English, and they're at the front. And if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to ask. With that said, to go on to the next page, okay, thank you. This is a chart, and I won't go through each and every law, but it points out that there are so many different agencies and different levels of government where people could file what was referred to as charges of discrimination or complaints, or start a case involving an alleged discriminatory action. The good news is that there are many different agencies that fight discrimination at the federal level. You have the EEOC, which maybe some of you have heard of, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, as well as the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, which Director Monroy, they work closely as a partner with HUD because there are so many cases that are filed. They can't all be handled by the federal agency. And so they work with state agencies to make sure that everyone who files a case with HUD will get that case investigated. There's also at the state level, you heard about the Department of Human Rights and the Illinois Human Rights Act, which I'll talk about a little bit as well, and our agency, the Illinois Human Rights Commission. And there are many other agencies at local levels, at the city level, at the county level. These examples on the slide here are for Cook County, but there are others in Aurora, a Human Rights Commission, and there are many other local level agencies. So if any of you are curious, look and see what those are and what the protections are, because it's often the case that the lower level, the local levels have stronger or broader protections than at the federal level, because Congress has to pass amendments to that law. And as we all know, that can be challenging. Moving on to the next slide. here. It's a PDF file, so it's a little bit trickier. Director Monroy did speak about the Illinois Human Rights Act, and it is over 40 years ago now that the Illinois Human Rights Act was signed into law by Governor Thompson, creating two separate but cooperative and collaborative agencies, the Department of Human Rights and the Illinois Human Rights Commission. The department investigates claims and charges of discrimination, and the Illinois Human Rights Commission adjudicates or has hearings on these cases, and we work together. I'd like to move on to the next one because, okay, and it's interesting how you heard Director Monroy make the point about protected factors. Protected classes is a legal term, but it is true that factors or bases are a little bit easier to think about when we think about all the protections that we have as human beings, and that each and every one of us has certain characteristics that could be and are protected under this very broad law. That's something I'm going to be thinking about in my future presentations about this law and its breadth and coverage. As you can see here, it might be hard to see a little bit because it's a small screen, but there are many different protected factors and statuses that people have and that are covered under Illinois law. And in fact, the Illinois Human Rights Act is one of the broadest civil rights laws in the entire country. So we're very fortunate to live here in Illinois. Next, please. That is just another page of all of the protected bases that we have. And in the brochure that I brought, and for those of you streaming online, you can find out more about us on our website, hrc.illinois.gov, Human Rights Commission, hrc.illinois.gov. And for those in the audience, we have copies of brochures which have information about these bases and factors if you want to read them later. I'll move on to the next. And in terms of the administration, we talked about the department and the commission. So I'll just skip ahead and move on to what the commission does, because Director Monroy talked about what the department does already. Thank you very much for scrolling down. We can move on to the next one because I can skip this one. He already spoke about it. Okay, so what does it mean to adjudicate a complaint of discrimination? Basically, there's a process that was mentioned earlier about an investigation where the Department of Human Rights takes up to a year and sometimes longer to investigate, to interview witnesses, to gather facts, to hold what's called a fact-finding conference where the different sides of a case come together. And sometimes they can work it out. They'll have a mediation or a settlement conference and they can resolve those charges or complaints of discrimination. However, sometimes that doesn't happen and the department issues a finding, either find substantial evidence of discrimination, which means that there's some evidence, there's enough evidence there that the case should move forward, whether it goes to a court of law or to my agency, Illinois Human Rights Commission, depends on the individual. They have that option to decide where to take the case. And I'll explain in a couple minutes why it might be beneficial to have the case proceed with the Illinois Human Rights Commission instead of a circuit court or a court of law. There's also an instance where there may not be substantial evidence and the case is dismissed. And there are other reasons why cases get dismissed. Sometimes people don't proceed with the case. Sometimes they file the case too late because there's a time limit to file. There's 300 days in employment cases from when an action occurred, or a year in housing cases, sometimes longer. So there are these time limits, statutes of limitations, if you will. And with the commission, we take a look at those. And many of the cases that I see are ones in which people are seeking a review of a decision made by the department. That's called a request for review. We have administrative law judges who are experts in their fields and have dedicated their careers to working on employment law and violations of the Illinois Human Rights Act. And that's one of the benefits of filing with the Human Rights Commission, because you're going to be appearing before people who have this expertise in this area of law, which can be complicated. And there's very fact-based, and there's a lot to break down and analyze in order to make a decision. Whereas in a court of law and a circuit court, the judges may not all have that level of expertise. In any case, there are many different ways in which cases can come to the commission, but as with the department, there are no filing fees with the commission. And also, if your primary language is not English, there will be resources made available for you to speak and engage in the process in your language, the language that you speak. That's very important, that there's access to all. Moving forward here, just to share a couple quick slides, just so you have a sense of our agency. We are a small agency, but we do a lot, and we are statewide. So it's the entire state of Illinois that we cover. I'm one of 7 commissioners. Our commission is chaired by Mona Noriega, and I'm one of the 7 commissioners. And we have an executive director. His name is Tracy B. Fleming, who runs the day-to-day operations of our agency. And we also have a general counsel and a chief administrative law judge. We have a lot of people with deep expertise in these areas. But not everyone is an attorney. In fact, our executive director does not have a law degree, but has deep management experience and operations experience. And we also have many other people on our team who work hard every day to process the cases that we receive, and attorneys that review each file. And we're a great team, and we're statewide. So we have an office in Springfield and an office in the Chicago area. But given changes in technology and the pandemic, people can file by emailing us documents now, which is a big change from before when they could only mail them or appear in person or fax. Now that email option makes it easier. So here you don't have to drive an hour plus to Chicago. You could email your documents. Let me move on to the next slide. It's sort of what I said before in terms of our team. And I like to share this with the public so you all know what we're doing, because sometimes people don't know what's going on in a government agency. And you'll see here from our structure that it's very organized. And the same is true with the department, which has a lot more people because they cover a lot more claims. But it's important for you all to know that we have experts in our fields working on these cases, and people who are deeply committed to the mission of our agency, which is to promote freedom from discrimination under the law, unlawful discrimination, that is. And Director Monroy made a really good point. Not all actions are unlawful under the Illinois Human Rights Act, but that doesn't mean they were right. And it's important, like he said, for people to exercise their rights, but also to let people know in your community when things are happening. Even if you might not think they're against the law, it's important to let people know and keep your community apprised. Let me move on to the next slide here. I'm not going to go over all the steps here because you can look at our website for more information, and please sign up for our mailing list as well. We have really good updates and educational programs as well that can give you helpful information for students. You can learn a lot more about civil rights. In any case, there's a process when going through our agency, and know that this process has been vetted, and we have talented people on our team who review every case and help the commissioners make a decision. I mentioned that I'm one of the 7 commissioners, and we make decisions in panels of 3. And there are some cases that are reviewed by the entire commission en banc, or all of us together, which would be 7 people. We have one commissioner is in the Springfield area, or reports to the Springfield office, and then we have 6 commissioners in the Chicago area that hail from different parts of Chicagoland. Oh, a fun fact, I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but the first chairman of our commission in 1980 was none other than Judge Manuel Manny Barbosa, who you heard about his sister, a longtime community activist and very important fixture in the community, and so was Judge Barbosa. I had the privilege of meeting him when I was first appointed to this position before he passed away, and I read his memoir, which was a fantastic book. If you haven't had a chance to read it, it was really important for me to learn about his life, and especially before he passed away. So he was someone who served as the first chair of our commission, which was a part-time agency until 2019 when I joined, and it became full-time commissioner position. One more thing before I move on to the process. I mentioned requests for review and the administrative hearing. You might be wondering, okay, the difference between a court and the administrative hearing process. The filing fees, there are none, and you'll have administrative law judges who have deep expertise in the law, and the cases can move more quickly. Sometimes cases can last, if any of you hopefully have not had to deal with litigation, but they can be years in a court of law. And with the commission, we are working as hard as we can to make sure that's not the case, that it's faster. And there are mediations and settlement conferences and other ways that disputes can be resolved. That is an important fact to note. And we have 5 administrative law judges with this deep expertise. Move on to the next slide. I'm almost finished. In terms of education and outreach, what I'm doing tonight and what our commissioners do is very important to let the public know about our agency, because if I should have asked you when we started, how many of you have heard of our agency? And I'm not sure half of you would have raised your hands, and that's okay. But now you know, please share information about the Department of Human Rights and the Commission, because it's free filing. We're available in languages that people speak. And we have this expertise on both their agency and our agency in these areas of the Human Rights Act. We have presentations at colleges and universities. We have them at community locations. So if any of you have any ideas for an outreach event where you think it would be helpful for us to speak to your community, including in Spanish, please let me know or contact Professor Ramirez and he can let me know, because it's very important that we get the word out about what our agency does. We are a fair, neutral, and impartial agency, but we enforce the Human Rights Act. And it's very important that we share that information with the public. We also have some internship opportunities for students. There are internship opportunities for law students as well as students in college. There is a summer internship program called the Michael Curry Summer Internship Program with the state of Illinois in general, and there's a Dunn Fellowship for college graduates. So these are very good resources that we like to share so that students know that you can continue to work on these issues and work for the state of Illinois as a student or afterwards. And there's a lot of great opportunities to work for the state of Illinois currently. And finally, we have a newsletter. So if anyone here is interested, if you go to our website, hrc.illinois.gov, you can find our mailing list, or you can ask me and I can give it to you. But we love to have you get updates from what we do, because we have several programs that are interesting and free. And we also have opportunities to learn more about the history of our agency and some of the cases we work on through our newsletter. I think I've said enough about education and outreach. So I just want to conclude by saying thank you. Thank you for listening. And we have 2 offices in Chicago and Springfield. But as I mentioned, any correspondence can be also done via email. And that's much easier given the distance that some people have to travel to get to downtown or from Southern Illinois. So I just want to thank everybody for listening to me tonight. I really hope that you found this informative from our 2 agencies, and that you continue to spread the word about the Illinois Human Rights Act and how broad a law it is, and that there are 2 agencies here that are fighting to protect people from discrimination. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vice Chair. We really appreciate hearing about how the state of Illinois and state government addresses human rights, but those are not the only institutions and people that are trying to address human rights in our community. So next we are going to hear from Jose Frausto, Executive Director of the Chicago Workers Collaborative, to talk a little bit more about what CWC is doing in our community.
Thanks everyone for being here. As he mentioned, I'm Jose Frausto. I'm Executive Director with Chicago Workers Collaborative. To start, I'm going to talk a little bit about what the collaborative is. We are a worker center. What we do is we empower people to learn how to defend their rights. We give workshops about workers' rights. We workshops about different laws that they can use in their favor whenever they feel that it's a violation at the workplace. That's the type of work that we do at the collaborative. Just basically, real quick, a little bit of a story. The collaborative was founded about 23 years ago. And the idea of creating this organization was, it just started as an ESL teacher, English as a second language teacher, trying to teach their students about the rights. He found a group of students that they were being abused at work and they didn't know what to do at that time. So he started talking to them about different rights, how to defend them. And from there, it started evolving and people start like wanting to learn more about workers' rights, organizing and that. And that's how the collaborative was created. I was so lucky to be part of that class at that time. And now 23 years later, I am the executive director of this organization. That's a little bit of story. So through the time, the collaborative has been helping mainly workers who work for temp agencies. Because temp agencies tend to abuse a lot of workers, take advantage of them because of their immigration status or because they are reintegrating into society after incarceration. And they feel that they are not going to defend the rights because they are so vulnerable. And since then, the collaborative has been doing this type of work. But that's not the only work that we do. We also help to create law, like passing rights for temp workers. In fact, this 2 months ago, we passed a law that it's called Temp Workers Safety Act, which basically is doing, what it does is, one, it gives equal pay for equal work, which talking about rights, that should be one of the basic rights, right? People doing the work and they should be paid equal, no matter the race, no matter their sex, they should have the equal pay. And also it gives safety for workers, more safety training for workers. That's we've through the time working with the organizer, we found like a lot of people have accidents at work because they are sent just from distant agencies without any training or without any safety protections, and they're more vulnerable to have this type of accidents. And we have seen people die in the first or second day of work because of poor training, and that's what we're trying to do with these laws. That's a little bit of the work that we do at the Chicago Workers Collaborative. We were talking about equality, right? What's the equality? Talking about rights, and it's a little hard to say like, oh, for people to connect human rights with labor, but actually that's a lot of it connect them. All those rights of like discrimination, the rights of equal pay, the rights of being respected at work. Those are human rights. And although it's really hard to connect them as human rights, people think like that's labor. What does that have to do with the human rights? But like as they were mentioning, these agencies actually also protect human rights at labor, which is one of the reasons why often we work together or we pass complaints to the government agencies, or work in the community as a community organization, as a worker center, is to go out in our communities and find these workers, invite these workers to come and empower, to learn about the different rights that they have, how can benefit from these rights. How good is to have a law when people do not know how to apply it, right? It's like not having anything. And that's the way that we at the Chicago Workers, we try to empower people, learning the rights, organizing them together so they can fight for better work conditions whenever they have situations of work. One of the biggest changes right now, or the biggest campaigns the Chicago Workers has, it's called DALE. DALE, it's the Fair Action for Labor Enforcement. Basically is an act that it passed through DHS, Department of Homeland Security, at the beginning of the year. And what it does is like every employer that has issues of work and has an open investigation with a government agency, and the government agency found that these are important people for the investigation, they can get a work permit if they need it. Because many times people are afraid to talk to the government agencies because they are undocumented. And since they connect that, like that's a government agency and I'm undocumented, why am I gonna go and give them their information? And that's the importance of having organizations like us, like community organizations like us. We can be the connection between the community and the government agencies. Try to explain people, these government agencies are here to protect your rights, not to turn you into immigration, right? You have rights in the state, you have rights as in the federal government, but we need to learn how we can teach people, how we can empower people to activate these rights and to work towards these rights. And going back to DALE, basically is like DALE, as I was saying, like DALE is undocumented workers can get a worker permit whenever they have an open investigation at the company. I'm going to give a big example right now. Chicago Workers Collaborative was collaborating with the General Attorney's Office in an investigation of child labor. I know when we say child labor, it's like, does that exist, right? Like child labor laws were passed so many years, but unfortunately, we still see a lot of child labor. And Illinois is one of the states that is still like suffers from child labor. And it was not far from here. That's a company called Hearthside, and one of their factories is in Itasca, which is not far from Elgin, right? So we can look around, and all these factories, sometimes they use child labor, and we don't even know. But these companies or temp agencies abuse of these kids, or because of their immigration status. These kids are come from other countries like South America, Central America mainly, and they are they need to pay. They need to send money to their parents, or their parents sometimes like they put money, or they put money or ask for money. Sorry, they borrow money towards their houses, towards their land, to send their kids to this country to have a better life. And these kids being here, they need to pay for that back in their countries. And what we found is like temp agencies use all these kids because they use fake IDs to say that they're overage. So, but they use them and they put them into jobs that they are really hard. Like they are jobs that they should not be doing as a kids. I mean, we know there's laws that exist for child labor, and also like kids have the right to work, but there's certain limitations. And these companies, they don't respect those limitations, and they put them in a very dangerous jobs where they have like amputations, like because they have to clean the machines and stuff like that. So when we opened this investigation with the Attorney General, we find that it was a lot of violations, and talking about equality, right? Because all these undocumented immigrants are considered like second-class citizens. Although they contribute in the country, although they pay taxes, but still, for some companies, for some agencies, they consider them as second-class citizens because they feel that they don't have rights, that they're not gonna talk about defending the rights. And that's where the collaborative come and try to talk to them, try to empower them to come forward and make these complaints to the respect correspondent government agencies. Again, going back, we were working directly with the general attorney, and we obtained a letter from DHS saying like, these people are important for this investigation, so they can qualify for DALI, for deferred action. So what we're doing right now, it's, as I mentioned, is one of the biggest jobs that we're doing. And we right now in the process of identifying all the workers that they can benefit from DALI to help them to file for work permits. The idea is not just to get them work permits and to get them change their status, but the idea is keep empowering them so they can make changes whenever they receive their work permits. They can be more open and start organizing other places and other workers and teaching them the rights, that they have rights, that they can do more to better their lives and to better their conditions, right? When we talk about equal pay, that's another human right, equal pay for equal work. And we find on the collaborative, like people who work for temp agencies make almost like $4 less than people who work directly for a company. So, and that's why we had the idea of working towards this law about equal pay. Luckily, we're going to start implementing at the beginning of October. And this is going to benefit people to have a little bit more money on their packets to help their families. So that's kind of the work that we do at Chicago Workers Collaborative. That's the type of work that we do around the community. We also have like a lot of, we have like 7 organizers, and we have about 30 community health, CHAs, community health workers, that they help us to go out in the communities and find these people, empower these people, bring them to the collaborative and see how we can help them. When when my colleagues were talking about like putting complaints through the internet, it's easier. That's something that we also do with the Department of Labor or government agencies. We talk to people whenever they have a situation. They're afraid because they don't know how to navigate technology. So they come to our organization and we try to help them to navigate technology to put these complaints. Otherwise, they just walked away and nobody find out about their abuses that they suffer in the work. So that's the way we try to talk to the community, try to bring the community, and try to help the community to better their conditions, better their conditions of work, and more than anything, to empower them to be vocal about violations that they see at the workplace. There's a lot of community organizations, but it's a little bit of a difference between what's a community organization, what's a worker center. Worker centers, we always been like, try to organize, try to empower people so they can better their conditions at work. That's something that it's really hard because not a lot of people, as they were talking, there's federal laws about work, that's state laws, and we need to figure out like which laws apply for each individual situation and how we can help them. That's the type of work, and that's the how the collaborative works with the community. Also, I know there's going to be a chance for questions later, but that's I just wanted to talk about that, like the work that we offer in the community and how people can come to Chicago Workers Collaborative. We always need volunteers. Like, for example, for this program, DALE, the hard site company, they have 11 different factories around Illinois. And this letter of intent it's good for all 11 places. And each company has about more than 1,000 workers. Majority of these workers are undocumented workers. Every time that we have a workshop, or every time that we have a event where we're going to help them to file for worker permits, we have about 20, 25 people show up to our office, and we are only like 5 volunteers. Like last time here in Elgin office, we stay until like almost midnight, like helping people to fill out paperwork. And these are the type of volunteer opportunities that we have at the collaborative. We have lawyers, we have an immigration lawyer, we have two labor lawyers, and these are the people who help us guide the volunteers, walk the volunteers through all the application. We give training to the volunteers how to fill out these applications. So, but yeah, Elgin, unfortunately, Elgin is one of the places that we having a hard time finding volunteers. And I mean, I know right now in the community college of Elgin, and what's better than invite students or invite people who are bilingual or who wanted to come and help us to our office in Elgin whenever we have these workshops. And if you have questions, I can pass the information about the collaborative. If you have any comments, please let us know. And I hope we can partner with some of you guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Frausto. With some really powerful examples of rights violations, right, occurring right in our own community, and then also expanding our idea of human rights to organizations that really link the community with the important work that our other 2 panelists are doing at the state level. So we're going to even broaden this conversation a little bit more and turn it over to Lilyana Olayo and Talibah Moore, who are both here representing the COFI organization. So Lilyana, looks like you're going to start us off here, or Talibah's going to start us. Okay. And just a reminder, you will have, we're running a little bit behind schedule, but you will have some time for questions at the end.
Hi, everyone. My name is Talibah Moore, and I'm a community organizer with COFI. Thank you, do I say Professor or Antonio?
Yeah, either is fine. Yeah.
Thank you for allowing myself and Lilyana to be here to share the amazing work that we do at COFI. And I also, I cannot be here in Elgin. I'm a resident of Chicago. Lilyana is a resident of Aurora. But we have a strong group of parents here that in Elgin, COFI parents in Elgin that's doing amazing work. And they probably, well, we have a few in the audience, and I know we probably have a lot that's watching us online. And I just want to make sure I shout out the Elgin Power Pack branch of COFI. So thank you all because they are doing a whole lot of great work here. So COFI, Community Organizing and Family Issues. COFI turns 28 this year, I believe next month, right? So COFI turns 28 years old. COFI mission, COFI is an organization about uplifting and building leaders, parent leaders in the different communities across the state. COFI's mission is to build the power and voice of parents to shape the public decisions that affect our lives and the lives of their families. We are building a movement. We are starting at the ground level, grassroots level. We are in the communities. We are talking to parents within grocery stores, especially in schools, laundromats everywhere. We're connecting, we're going into the communities where parents are and meeting them at their doorstep. Sometimes also we do that a lot. We are about building leadership and giving, helping parents understand and teaching parents that they have a voice, that they are leaders in their communities and they can make change. A lot of times we live in communities that doesn't have a grocery store, and you live there for years and years and years, and parents don't know how to organize or advocate to make change. And that's where COFI comes in, because COFI go to those neighborhoods and say, parents, this is not right. And so parents like, ooh, you know what, this is not right. And so they start to meet together, have goals that they want for themselves and goals that they want for their families, and eventually have goals for their whole community. And I'm kind of jumping over. So COFI believes that parents are natural leaders as experts on their families and their communities. Leadership starts from within. We all are leaders, and until you know that you won't be able to make change until you understand that you are a leader. Everyone in here is a leader, and you can make change starting at your in your home, in your own personal life, and then just when you start doing those amazing things and achieving goals, just imagine the things that you can do when you go out in the communities. So COFI believes that day-to-day struggles are often rooted in public policies, systems, or practices. When you talk about human rights, I'm gonna say that for Lilyana, because we know the system is not always on our side. And so parents are not just fighting at the community level, they're fighting at the state level as well. And Lilyana is gonna share more about that. COFI believes in collective leadership, collaboration, and partnership. Sitting on this panel today, just listening to everyone share, I'm like, oh, I want to connect with her. Oh, Chicago workers' rights. My son is a new worker. He's in the workforce, and those are interesting. I want to make sure my son's rights are being met. And just hearing everything here, that's what we're about. We want to collaborate and connect and build leadership with everyone. What what slide are we on? The COFI way. So the COFI way, we use a model that's called a focused organizer model. We have 3 phases of our model that we created to build family support of communities by developing parents' capacity to lead with diverse populations that have historically been excluded from decision-making tables in mind. The COFI way also builds power and capacity for individuals to solve problems by starting with personal development. Again, that starting personal and then within your family and your home, and then moving into what you can change in your community. And when you go statewide, just changing systems, passing bills that are better for us. So the first phase of the COFI model, next slide, please. It's called self, family, and team building. This is my favorite phase of the COFI way. This is where, again, you start to learn about yourself and you learn what you can do for your family. And you share these ideas in a room with other parents and community, and you all become a team. It happens so naturally. And you would never think that someone who lived a couple of blocks from you would be part of your supportive team. And you all are able to connect and do things to make change for the whole community that you live in. So the next slide, please. Phase 2 of the COFI model is called community outreach and action. This is where I like to say that our parents are mini organizers. So they go in the communities. Once they went through phase 1 and they built these tight relationships with each other, they began to become mini organizers. And so they go in the communities and they start organizing other residents in the area, and they start making changes for the better. We always want to make sure that it's parents that's leading and parents that's at the table making these decisions about our lives with those within power. So the community outreach in action, parents continue to work together to create change in the community. Institutions such as schools, childcare centers, and social service agencies. And next slide, please. This is where it gets heavy. So phase 3 policy and system change. I'm gonna pass it over to Lilyana, and she's gonna share all of the amazing work that we're doing on the state level and how parents are really organizing to not only for their community in East St. Louis or their community in Evanston, but communities all across the state of Illinois.
Hello, everyone. Could you hear me, right? Okay. My name is Lilyana Olayo, and I'm a parent. But what is a parent, right? I usually, before taking the training in the COFI model, I was just like, but I don't know, I cannot do anything. I'm just a parent. I'm just a parent. When I realized that the power that a parent has, that was like, I am a parent, not more, I'm just a parent. Okay. We hear about phase 1 and phase 2. And when you already organize your life, your personal life, you organize your family, you start organizing your community, what's next? You start asking yourself, what's next? You are ready. Once your vision change into like inequities and equalities, you know, you are ready for justice. You are ready to fight the fight. And at this point, I'm just saying a bunch of parents organizing. And we realize that we work a lot with the Afro-American communities, and we are saying we are brothers and sisters. And sometimes it's like, really? It's like, yeah, you know. See, there's a lot of power. They couldn't take the power. All right. When you realize that these most communities are always the most impacted with all these issues, the inequities. We try to fight the system because it's not working, but at the same time, when see we are very different, right? Every human, it's very different. But when we realize we want the best for our families, we want the best for our children, that's what it comes, you know, got us together and fight the fight. In this policy and changes systems, we realize that the change, it's not possible just like, you know, fighting with the neighbors, fighting with the local police. It's just, it get us to like, the change has to come all the way on top. But when it's just a bunch of parents don't know what even to start, with the COFI model, when they teach you, you know, how to advocate for yourself, you learn it right because you live the life that is affected every day, and you realize that we need to change that. You know, there's a point where parents, we got like enough is enough, and we need to learn and got the tools with the COFI model and start organizing our neighbors. Yes, because we got to understand that I cannot do it by myself. So I start organizing my neighbors, I start organizing my communities, I start organizing. And that's the power in the organizations, that you realize that you cannot do it alone and you cannot do it by yourself. One of the things that we have with the COFI model, it's that first you start looking at your surroundings, you start looking at your communities and start asking yourself, what could I change if I have the power to change things? And you start dreaming. And once you start dreaming and you start with some short goals, and then you make a victory, then you start setting higher goals. For example, one of the things that we were advocating, and we started advocating about 8 years ago, was children's savings account. The first time I heard something about children's savings account for college, I was like, what is that? I didn't even know my family could even dream of sending my kids to college. And we're talking about like human right, right? All the children are the same, but not all the children have the same opportunities. And when we're talking about opportunities, the Latinx community is always in disadvantage. Why? Because most of the parents don't understand the system, don't speak the language, don't even know where to start. And it's like, well, we make it just working hard. But as parents, we realize that working hard doesn't take us too far. So we got the dream for our children for a better future. But when we don't have the support of a bigger system, or a system that is actually working for us, not against us, it's even harder. So we start dreaming of what if, and when in the second phase, that was community and outreach and action, we actually went out the community, put a community forum asking families, what would it be if you have the support to send your kids to college? And I could see the pride in the families once you start putting them to dream. And most families were like, where do I sign my child? It's like, this is just a dream. We don't have Illinois, but so another state has it. So why not us? And we start fighting almost 10 years ago. Myself, I started getting involved 8 years ago. And let me tell you, this year it passed. Our children for all Illinois has the right. And they're gonna have the government, they call it first steps. And it's like, yes, that's right. That's the first steps. It's not the last step. It's the first step. Yes, you're right. They're gonna deposit $50 for every child born in Illinois in 2023 or adopted in Illinois. So that's a start. Where you can send your children. You can tell your children, the government believe in you. We tell our children, you are the future. And we can tell them, yes, they have $50 to start. It's a seed where you're going to start your your college. And that's the beginning. So when we realize we make it happen, now what's next? And the next victory, we just organize with some other, remember, all this is collaborating with some other agencies. Another big victory that we have fighting and talking to legislators. So we went to Springfield. We have once a year, we have one activity. It's called Moms on a Mission. And we go all the way to Springfield with many school buses. We take parents from all state, Elgin, Aurora, Evanston, Chicago. We have 4 buses almost, and we're there. One of these, we were advocating for those driver license that they're not just for undocumented people, that they don't have the Social Security. So those driver licenses, they have a letter, some letters that say not valid for identification purposes. You know how frustrating it is for an immigrant not having a valid ID in the state of Illinois. And, you know, we're talking about human rights. It's like, okay, that ID, it's valid for driving only. But that, when you see that ID, it tells you right there that that person doesn't have immigration status. And, you know, that's abuse, because you make feel that person that's a person that doesn't have the right to be here. That's the person that doesn't belong here. And that's the person that pays the same taxes that you do. But at the end of the year, cannot collect those taxes back because the immigration status. Human rights, what are we talking about? And when we talk about housing, you know, for an immigrant person, or not only an immigrant person, but a person with low income, just the right to have a house, and they have the issue to think about choosing to pay their bills or to pay the rent is even harder. You might have the house, but you might have no electricity, or you have to choose what to pay this month. And okay, I choose to pay this, but what about next month? And that's every week, every month, every year. So when we talk about human rights, I have a dream. I have a dream of collaborating together. And I have a dream that we can work to try to end these inequities. Before getting the training in the COFI model, I was just with a trend that equal. I want to be equal. I want it equal. But when I start hearing about, okay, equal, sometimes it's not enough, because there's a lot of inequities that deserve to be served with fairness. Another example, and quick example, I can tell you, child tax credit. When we collect the child tax credit, we ask for the right for our American-born children here in the US. But guess what? If the parents doesn't have the Social Security, they couldn't collect the child tax credit that was belonging to the children because the immigration status. We fought with some other collaborations, and it's like, it's not fair, because you are telling my son is an American citizen, but it's not, it doesn't has the same value as your other American child. Human rights, what is that? You are sending the message to my son that even though he's born here in the US, he doesn't have the same right as these other American children. The parents pay the same taxes as everybody, but they cannot collect the taxes back. I was talking to many people and seeing my community and suffering with them with this inequity. It's like, how is that possible? I believe that the US was like the best country to live in, to raise a family. But when you see these kind of things, those inequities again, it makes you think twice. How injustice. And we collaborate with other agencies, we work together, and guess what? We are halfway, because we got to get like blended families. Now they can collect the child tax credit. That was the right for the children. And there's so many other victories that I could tell you, but what we do more in COFI it's not only fighting to change the system, it was not working, but it's like doing parent engagement. The community is us, and we are the community. So we learn how to build relationships all the way, not only with the neighbors, but now we know how to make relations with the local representations, with the state reps, with the, and why not? Maybe I can get some relationships with you guys now, and we can bring some tools, new tools to learn how about the human rights. And that word will keep resonating with me because it's everybody deserves so justice and fairness. And well, I could be talking all night here, but I know we don't have the time. So I'm gonna have some time to get some questions and answers.
Let's give all the panelists one more round of applause. Thank you so much. Just some really expansive vision of human rights here, starting right with the COFI model with the self and the family and the children and the workplaces and our larger community and our state, including our state government. So I don't want to talk too much because I know it's a bit late. Does anyone have any questions from the audience? Maybe we'll take a few questions before we adjourn. Any questions for any of the panelists? Question here? All right. You could just state your name and then your question.
Sure, my name is Bob White. For the human rights folks, you mentioned the number of factors that employers cannot use when they hire someone. Are there factors that employers can use when they try to choose an employee from a group of applicants?
So I can only speak towards the Illinois Human Rights Act and what our work is. But as far as our work is that the list of that we had earlier on the screen of the prohibited factors, that's what we're looking at to see if somebody's been discriminated against. So if there's anything not on that list, that might not be something that's covered by the Human Rights Act. So it might be acceptable from the department, but of course it could be unlawful somewhere else. Some of the frequent questions that we get are about, for instance, background checks. Is it okay to ask a background check? We do have some conviction and some arrest record protections. But if people are asking the same questions of people and then treating them not in violation of the law, then in most cases it's okay. So very complicated answer, of course, because there's many different laws that are not enforced by our agencies. But essentially, if you're treating people equally and asking the same questions, and it's not related to one of those protected bases, it might be okay.
I'll just add very briefly that without getting into too many technicalities, there's something called disparate treatment and disparate impact, where sometimes there are policies that on their face appear to be fine, but there's a statistical impact or disparity that affects one group over another group. And that's something that occurs more often at the federal level. But what we see a lot of are disparate treatment, where an individual is treated differently at the hiring process or during the job or at a termination of an employment position because of one of those protected categories. And that's what the department will look at to see what is the issue and then what is the basis on which they made that decision. Was it because of that person's race or national origin? But with disparate impact, it's a little more complex because it's not obvious or they didn't use race as a factor, but the impact affected people because of who had a certain racial background or national origin or gender. We could talk about that more, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Thank you very much for your wonderful presentations. I have a question for the Department of Human Rights, and that has to do with the protection from the misuse of E-Verify. This is a very common misuse of E-Verify in the community, where people are told that if you're not E-Verifiable, you can't get a job. But that's really not what the process should be. And there's a protections I understand in the Human Rights Act.
Yes, I'm so glad that you mentioned that because that's not one of the list of the things that I explicitly put up on the chart, but is incredibly important. So in the Illinois Human Rights Act, and this is only applies to employment because that is the area of the act that it puts into, and of course, E-Verify is used with employment. It is a violation of the Illinois Human Rights Act to misuse E-Verify. Now, the problem is, of course, proving what is misusing E-Verify. So that is oftentimes kind of a complex thing. And it also might involve the Department of Labor for the state that also has new protections. And I believe there is a new protection against the misuse of E-Verify that's going to affect next year. I'm not sure if the employment folks here are more familiar with it. Okay. Yeah. So unfortunately, I don't have much more information about it, but they might. Senator Cervantes, I think it was, passed the new E-Verify law. But it is very closely tied to the federal law. So if somebody is misusing E-Verify, the state law violations are tied to some misuse federally too. So people could complain to both state and federal agencies and see their own employer, their own attorney to see if there's other kinds of remedies. But thank you so much for bringing that up because incredibly important that somebody misuses E-Verify. That means that that's a state law violation too.
Any other questions? You wouldn't mind sharing your name first?
Hi, my name is Laura. I have a couple questions, but I think I will direct it to the Illinois Workers Coalition. You had mentioned a particular incident that involved factories, and it sounded like the documentation that was given was not accurate for the workers who were minors. I was just curious, how does that play out in terms of the employer's responsibility? If, how are we going to hold them accountable for something where they're given bad information? How did that work out in that case?
The case is still in investigation. It's going to be really hard to hold the company accountable for it, since the workers were hired by a third party, in this case, a temp agency. That was actually one of the reasons why the collaborative passed this case to the general attorney instead of Department of Labor, because we found that in other states, like for example, North Dakota, instead of investigating the companies or the temp agencies, were they holding the parents accountable, and they were parents, what they were being charged for not protecting their children. So child services got into it, and that was one of the reasons why Chicago Workers Collaborative made the decision not to work directly with the Department of Labor or try to find other venues where we can protect the identity of the children and also their parents, so they cannot be hold accountable for these kids that they were working. Unfortunately, the company, then that's one of the reasons why companies use temp agencies to hire people, because that's a way that they can say they're not my direct hire, so I cannot be accountable for that. But also when it's accidents happen, or in this case, like temp agency says, like, it's not my problem because it happened inside the company. So that's why both entities feel that the workers don't have protections and they can be easily abused. That's why they use this type of workers for that. We don't know specifically what's going to happen with the whole investigation and who is going to be held accountable for that, but we're hoping that there will be penalties for the company also and for the temp agencies. So,
any other questions for the panelists?
Hello, my name is Maripas. I have a question about the Illinois Department of Housing. How do you file a complaint?
You. So to file a complaint, people could get one of the complaint forms that is on our website. Fortunately, we just changed our website name, and the URL is not as direct, but you can Google, and of course you can, with what you're holding right now, the materials from the Human Rights Commission have direct links from their website to ours. people, there is essentially just two categories of cases that we investigate. There are housing cases and there's everything except for housing. So if individuals have a housing case, they can look at our form, kind of follow the links, look at our website, follow the links through to file a housing complaint. And then whether it is anything dealing non-housing, employment, financial accommodations, financial credit, public accommodations, that's all the same form as well too. But very important, if somebody is feels that they've been injured, they've been discriminated against, they need to file right away. Because for housing cases, people need to file within 1 year. And for everything else, I believe it is about 300 days. And the clock starts when people are violated that last action. So if somebody was dismissed or not hired, not promoted, that starts then, and then the clock stops when somebody files a complaint with our agency. So yes, if you have a complaint, please file it right away.
Thank you. We have another question here.
Oh, wait, can I mention one more thing? And we didn't talk about it. You do not need a lawyer to file a complaint or a charge with the Department of Human Rights, or even to proceed with the Illinois Human Rights Commission. While that is recommended, one of the benefits of going through the process of the investigation is that an individual can see how the investigation goes. And then if it moves forward to a court of law or the Human Rights Commission, then they can get an attorney. But to start the process, a lawyer is not needed for that. Just want to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, another question.
Sí, yo tengo una pregunta de lo de casas de vivienda. Sabemos que han venido muchos inmigrantes de Venezuela y sabemos que se le está dando ahorita una ayuda a ellos para rentar casas. Pero sé que no les quieren rentar porque pues no tienen documentos, no tienen un trabajo, aunque presenten esa carta de que les van a ayudar 6 meses de renta. Los propietarios no les quieren rentar. En ese caso, ¿qué se puede hacer? Porque yo creo que ahí están violando derechos humanos.
Absolutely.
Can I translate the question real quickly?
Yes.
I will do my best to translate it, but the question was about Venezuelan migrants, that they do have some help from the government to rent houses, but there is some concern about landlords discriminating against them because they might not be able to work or they might not have a solid income. So the question was, are human rights being violated or rights being violated for the Venezuelan migrants?
Absolutely.
¿Qué pueden hacer ellos? ¿A dónde pueden ir? ¿O con quién se pueden quejar? Porque
Yes.
hay muchos que no encuentran casa.
Yes.
What can they do? Where can they go? And many of them cannot find homes.
Is it all right if I reply in English and then we can translate?
Yes, I will try.
Thank you so much. I understand Spanish pretty well, but speaking it is a little awkward, of course. So the question, of course, in those situations, Venezuelan immigrants and other immigrants that are coming, they're discriminated against. A few things that I already mentioned are just very important for those people. First of all, national origin. If somebody has been is being treated differently because they're from Venezuela versus from Mexico, from Poland, from Ukraine, that could be a violation. So the place where someone comes from, their national origin is protected. Another important thing is immigration status. Now, immigration status is not something that is protected explicitly yet, although it's very closely tied to national origin. If somebody is starting January 1st of 2024, so this next coming year, if somebody is turned away because they're a migrant, because they're undocumented, because they're a non-citizen, that will be illegal explicitly. And so that'll be even more protected. And the third thing is currently, right now in Illinois, we have what is called source of income protection, meaning that landlords must accept financial assistance too, or Section 8 vouchers. So if somebody is coming and they're a migrant and they say, I want to rent, but this church, this other program is going to pay my rent, just fill out this form, it would be illegal for the landlord to say, no, I'm not going to cooperate and fill out the form. So all of those together, national origin, soon to be immigration status, and a source of income, we hope people will file complaints with us. And when people file complaints with our agency, our intake investigators speak with them, hear their entire story, and so we'll help try to figure out what actually happened, and at that stage we'll start the investigation if there's anything there that's signaling that it was filed with us on time and there's something protected behind it. Muchas gracias por la pregunta.
I think we might have time for one more question. Any final questions for the panelists? All right, well, let's give the panelists one more round of applause. Thank you all for being here. Just some wonderful insights here, and a lot of resources as well for folks who want to learn more about human rights in Illinois at the state level, to file complaints. The Chicago Workers Collaborative is actively seeking volunteers to help with the DALE program to help folks file complaints and potentially change their immigration status as a result of workplace complaints. And I know that COFI is always looking for brilliant leaders and folks who want to participate as well. So I hope the panelists will be able to hang out a little bit and answer any of your questions, but thank you all for being here. And I look forward to seeing you at other Latinx Heritage Month events here at ECC. So thank you so much.
Yes.